Mental work environment. The mental work environment is the third determinant area to be able to and want to work, and is part of the determinant sphere called personal health in relation to the work environmental circumstances. The concept previously called psychosocial work environment is a concept that's now usually divided in two: the mental work environment and the work social environment. The reason for this is that the social part of the work environment and the organizational work does not only affect the mental well-being among employees, but also their physical well-being. Therefore, it's easier to divide them, even if they affect each other. Therefore, the Swedish model does not use the concept of psychosocial work environment, but rather divide this in two determinant areas to be able to and want to work. In other words, these areas are 3. The mental work environment, and 7. The work social environment. However, this lecture will be based on what was earlier called psychosocial work environment for a historical retrospective. Is the psychosocial work environment a new concept then? No. Already back in 1941, the social psychologist Marie Jahoda discussed mental and psychosocial issues for girls working in factories. Psychoanalyst Erik H. Erikson coined the concept of psychosocial work environment in 1959. The concept of psychosocial work environment was included in the Swedish Work Environment Act in 1978. During the 1980s and 1990s, the demands increased due to new technology. Computers had the big breakthrough which caused many work tasks to change. New tasks emerged and old tasks diminished. At the same time, the recession caused organizations to cut costs during the 1990s. Others went bankrupt, and organizations and enterprises were streamlined. This caused increased demands of availability and rapid conversions in production in order to meet the demands of the market. The competition put demands on increased delivery security, and the amount of sickness absence increased significantly. The demand and control model aims to display the connection between the employee's health and their influence in the workplace. The factors that affect the demand and control in a work situation are described to be cooperation and social support, influence in known work, influence in the organization, insecurity in employment, physical demands, mental demands, competence, development opportunities, social support from the manager, mental health, physical health. If these demands are too high, irregular, or hard to interpret and comprehend, and the employee at the same time experiences a lack of control of these demands and lacks social support from others in the workplace, the stress levels increase. Prolonged periods in such a state is hazardous to health. At the same time, understimulation can be hazardous to health and cause passivity, lethargy, and discontent. Furthermore, some organizations are alluring and greedy. A good work with a high level of control can cause ill health if the organization demands too much responsibility, overtime work, energy, attention, and efforts of the individual, and the individual cannot set limits and say no. The parameters demand, control, and support are based on an organizational perspective rather than the individual's ability to say no and slow things down. This model was developed by Karasek Theorel during the 1970s and 1990s. Today, anxiety, mild depression, and different types of fatigue, in other words, mental health issues, are the most common reason for sick leave. What constitutes the mental work environment? The mental work environment includes how people are biologically and functionally affected by their mental work environment. As previously discussed in the lecture on health in Module B, a stimuli that triggers the nervous system to react is called a stressor. When our nervous system is triggered, this causes a stress reaction. Periods of high workload, having a lot on your plate, lack of time, lack of staff, or new work tasks that demand more time and energy need to be replaced with periods of a lower workload in order for the nervous system to have the possibility to relax and recuperate. However, the employee is not just a working human being. Factors and exposure outside work cooperate, and previous experiences affect our disposition of reacting to stresses. Therefore, we become stressed due to different factors and we react to stress in different ways. Individuals who may have been exposed to very stressful situations in the past and whose nervous system reacts quickly in similar situations in order to protect the individual, or an individual may be exposed to high levels of stress outside work, perhaps due to a child not feeling well at school, a divorce, an ill parent, a friend needing support, etc. These are all stresses that demand energy from the employee. All this can, together with a stressful situation at work, make an individual more sensitive or even hypersensitive to all kinds of stress or too much influence from the surroundings, and consequently react to both abstract and vital stresses, and cause an overload of the nervous system. Others may, due to previous experiences, be able to sort between which stresses are important and which are less important to react to. These individuals can put up a protective mental wall not to react to abstract stresses, or what they consciously or unconsciously assess not to be threatening enough to the individual. They may have learned through healthy relationships, security, and social support that they are protected and taken care of and don't need to react, fight, or endure all by themselves in order to survive and manage. They all have a sense that someone is taking care of them, which makes them experience a sense of security and can relax, even if others are overstrained and may be close to screaming due to the same stresses. How we manage stress and stresses is called coping strategies. All individuals use different coping strategies to manage stress. Even if most people form the basis for their coping strategies in young years, they constantly change due to what we're exposed to, how we manage in coping with stresses, and how successful our previous coping strategies have been. Therefore, learning to manage and cope with stress and stresses is something that all individuals constantly work with, and we use a lot of our conscious and unconscious energy on. What happens in the body during a stress reaction triggered by a particular event? To summarize the body's reaction to stress. The body prepares to manage a physically demanding activity, since the evolution of the brain cannot fathom the rapid societal development but rather thinks and reacts in the same way as during the Stone Age. Therefore, a stress reaction causes a physical survival strategy, even if we're not about to run for our life or start a fight. During a stress reaction, the human body's reactions are the following: increased concentration of glucose in the bloodstream, increased concentration of fatty acids in the bloodstream, increased cardiac output, increased blood flow to the skeletal muscles and reduced blood flow to inner organs and skin, increased blood pressure, increased alertness. If the individual is subjected to long-term stress, this affects the brain and the regulation of neurotransmitters, hormones, and organs that regulate hormones. If the increased energy in the blood is not burned off by the skeletal muscles through physical activity, this can cause illness in the body. Therefore, it's important to take the mental work environment seriously. Otherwise, it can risk causing suffering to both the individual employee and to the enterprise and organization, as well as to society, through loss of production and increased costs. Stress triggers reactions in our bodies and in our hormone system. The body prepares to face danger. The pulse and blood pressure increases as our bodies prepare to fight or flight. However, the things that stress us in our work environment can rarely be managed through physical efforts, through fight or flight. Instead, we store the tension in our bodies, which increases the risk of developing illness and ill health such as cardiovascular diseases, cancer, depression, diabetes, and fatigue. Signs of stress are when we experience lack of sleep at night, feeling tired despite having slept, frequently experiencing head or stomach aches, tension of the body resulting in aching neck or shoulders, palpitation, feeling dejected or having anxiety, feeling indifferent to or uninterested in what is happening around you, easily getting irritated and angry over little things, having a harder time to concentrate and increased forgetfulness, feeling restless and having difficulties to relax. There are risk factors in most workplaces that can trigger short or long-term stress. However, this largely depends on how we perceive the situation. In other words, it's very individual. It also depends on what we experience in our life outside work, in our personal life. In other words, it depends much on how we cope. Risk factors that can cause stress in the workplace are, for example, insufficient resources, threats and violence, lack of temporary staff, ambiguous leadership, role ambiguity, hidden hierarchy, time constraints in work tasks, unclear responsibilities, insufficient knowledge of work tasks, irregular working hours, agreement of unregulated working hours, always being available or reachable, for example by phone or email, conflicts in the workplace, or insecure forms of employment. In certain circumstances, the development in workplaces seem to go right against better judgment. Many workplaces are problematic regarding forms of employment, working hours, and the work environment. It seems like the assembly line and Taylorism have returned through, for example, lean production, in the industry and the service sector, as well as in healthcare. Old work environment issues turn up in new industries, and new kinds of work environment issues turn up in the path of economization, globalization, new technology, and modern life. It seems like knowledge on work environment has partially been forgotten, and that it's harder to integrate in the development of production and organization. However, we can also see positive trends. Parts of working life move towards positive self-regulation, where hurting people is unthinkable and the work environment is a natural part of the business mission. There's a renaissance for ideas of comprehensive use, workplace design, participation, self-governing teams, the learning organization and workplace learning, and creativity among employees. A more developed concept of work environment, which is more distinct and contains organizational development and learning. It's important that managers and employers are aware of the stresses in working life, not least since ill health and sickness absence increase due to stress reactions, which in turn affects the organizations and enterprises. Many factors can contribute to stress reactions in employees, so it's easier to use the 9 different determinant areas of the Swage model in order to determine what can trigger stress reaction in employees, and to examine what may need to be adjusted in their own workplace to improve their employees' mental work environment. In other words, examine whether risk of stresses are present in a workplace that can trigger stress reactions in employees. Take a few moments to consider and reflect on the following questions. What stresses are the most demanding in your mental work environment? What stresses are the most demanding in your different co-workers' individual mental work environment?